That's not God's fault, and it's not the still small voice's fault. It's totally all me. Welcome to listening to The Still Small Voice. I'm Jennifer, your host, the Still Small Voice Whisperer. Thank you for joining me today. I am hoping this podcast gets you thinking, intuiting, listening, and maybe even acting on your still small voice. Hi everyone, I'm Jennifer and I'm all about listening to the still small voice. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I'm not great at listening or acting all the time on my still small voice. I shared with a coworker not too long ago that if things in my life are messed up, it is not God's fault. That's the terminology that made sense for them. So that's the terminology I use as God. That's not God's fault, and it's not the still small voice's fault. It's totally all me. I'm not necessarily great on acting at it or listening. I have to listen first before I can act, right? For example, in the past, I've had the voice tell me this simple, easy next step. It's so clear, it's so simple, it's so easy, I can't even argue with it. Like, there's no reason. The still small voice will say, tile square in front of me, just take a step to the tile. That's all it'll say. Just take a step. Requires nothing of me. Just moving a step. And I'm like, nope, I'm going to step to the right on the other one instead. Like, I want to see what happens. It's all me. And I know it. And I own it. We've talked about in other episodes that there are times and there are reasons to that stepping out on that X, like I told you, is not your correct next step. Okay, maybe you're like me and are stubborn and you just don't want to, ever at all. And there's nothing any voice, including your soul voice, your still small voice, could do to get you there. It's just not happening. I mean, have you ever watched a toddler break down their parents? Or have you ever been the recipient of someone so persistent, so perfectly annoying that you caved from your original answer just to get them to go away? And then have you ever been so sure of something and you were like, this is it, I got it. And then within 1 moment later, completely reverse your decision with no chance of going back. I mean, I do that more than I'd like to admit. Because the still small voice, as we've discussed before, it's not a dictator. You have a relationship with the still small voice, just like you have a relationship with the people and things and ideas around you. Unfortunately, I ignore, reject, and deny my still small voice all the time. That doesn't mean I'm not necessarily listening to it and acting with it, though there are times that definitely happens. It just means that I'm a human being who gets to make her own decisions. It's like listening to a doctor or therapist or your mother's advice. Odds are pretty good that they're right, or at least they have some points that are helpful. But you're actually under no obligation to listen to that advice or act on it. I refuse to give up my butter. I don't care how high my cholesterol is. And again, I know I sound like the cranky toddler, but let's be honest, we all have things that we sound like cranky toddlers about. And if you could be persuaded to change your mind about things, eventually, maybe at one point I will give up butter. I actually eat way less butter than I ever imagined I would before. At the same time, what makes you think you can't change the still small voices either? If it's a relationship, it's a relationship. It's a two-way street. I could reference something about Abraham in the Bible bargaining with God to save Sodom and Gomorrah, but you get the point. I want to seek the way. I want to seek the vending machine God, even though I know better. So I want to say that if I follow my still small voice, it always works out. But it really depends on the moment of time that you're seeing my story, or anybody's story. I have a couple twists and turns in my story that, looking back, I do kind of question my still small voice. I had peace on the inside, but the outside was a disaster, and I wasn't even doing it to get to a better place. So I question the still small voice. I disagree. And I ignore it because sometimes, for real, not right now. And in any real relationship, right, there's nothing wrong with that. It's healthy. It's normal. Done with more respect. I will admit that I'm a little more bratty and childish with my still small voice. I've got to work on upping my game on that. But unfortunately, it's not how we're brought up to think about God or any other supernatural force or universe in our lives. We mentioned, a couple stories of like, this person talked with God and changed his mind. But it's not a common thing. It's like a once a year, once every couple of years thing. So God or the universe or source or however you think of it, usually he, it, she, they. I hate that we even have to use a term for it because there's no term for the universe, God, whatever. But they're portrayed as all-knowing, all-seeing, and it kind of leaves us with little agency of our own, except for those few moments that we hear about these stories where these people interacted with God and had a relationship and maybe changed, quote-unquote, God's mind. But I will argue that what is better is for the relationship to be healthy, which is a dialogue relationship. We've all learned one-sided relationships no good. Not helpful for anybody, doesn't help anybody, doesn't cause us problems down the road. So we want to have a relationship to dialogue and be human with our still small voice inside of us, which can mean being a toddler and disagreeing, which can mean having a conversation about it, which can mean trying to persuade the still small voice that this is not exactly what we need to be doing right now. All of that is valid and healthy and reasonable. While you're thinking about disagreeing, and I also use the word bargaining, if that's a term that works for you, or disagreeing or having a healthy discourse, that is what the still small voice is all about, is having a relationship. It is not about being a dictator and telling you what to do, because you do have agency. Your thoughts and beliefs and decisions on things do matter to that voice, do matter to your soul, do matter to God, do matter to everybody around you. It is not a dictator. Like, unfortunately, even I am very comfortable in taking orders and doing the thing and, getting the pat on the head or getting the gold star, even though I know it's not healthy and it's not right, and I don't really want a gold star anyway. Who wants a gold star? I mean, maybe you do, but I'd rather give myself the gold stars. Anyway, tangent, really thinking about being in a relationship with yourself, the only person you're around every single day. And this is how you can think about interacting with all of the voices. I've got a lot of them. The still small voice and otherwise. Societal conditioning, parents, maybe something, when you promised yourself something 25 years ago that maybe isn't working out for you right now. It's having that relationship. Relationships matter. Next episode, we'll talk about kind of questions that maybe you can default and go to when you're in that moment and maybe angry, sad, or just, shut down by it, and how to maybe help that relationship. We'll think of this as therapy for you and your still small voice next time, talking about questions and how to bring both sides out and how to make sure we're being honest with ourselves as an infinite side, and with ourselves here in the reality in our human bodies. So I will see you all next episode. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Welcome to listening to The Still Small Voice. I'm Jennifer, your host, the Still Small Voice Whisperer. Thank you for joining me today. I am hoping this podcast gets you thinking, intuiting, listening, and maybe even acting on your still small voice.